My name is Conn Carroll. I'm with Heritage Foundation, and we're here for This Week in Blog. We have a special guest filling in for Bill, Sara Robinson. If you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Sure, I'm Sara Robinson. I am with Bill Scher, a fellow at the Campaign for America's Future, where Bill and I both blog at ourfuture.org.
Awesome. So this week we have yet another chapter in the left versus Obama, I guess you could say. And this time the flare-up is Obama's choice for evangelical minister, I'm blanking on his first name, Warren, to give the invocation on Obama's inauguration. So I guess I'll first just ask your reaction, and then you can go ahead and pull your favorite blog post on the subject from around the sphere. Okay.
Boy, what can I say? Rick Warren, who has done a great job of selling himself as a mainstream moderate. So he wants to be the next Billy Graham, is what's going on here. He wants to be America's pastor. And Obama has given him a tremendous legitimacy hit by allowing him to give the invocation at the inauguration.
Well, we should first say that this is not the first time Obama has legitimized him in some way.
No.
He also graced Warren with his presence at really the first presidential debate of the season. The first joint appearance between McCain and Obama was at the Warren Church out there in Saddleback.
Exactly. And there was some gritching from the left at the time about that, but we figured, it's a big tent, and McCain was there, and it was very fair and even-handed. There wasn't the kind of preferential sense that now Warren is being showcased in a major way, and we have problems with this. We have big problems with this. Not just the gay community, and Warren has said in the last week that homosexuality should not, is an abomination basically, and that gays should not be allowed to marry. He's okay with civil unions, but he's not okay with basically any other kind of gay rights. He is vociferously anti-choice. He denies global warming. Basically every kind of retrograde thing we thought we were getting rid of when Jerry Falwell passed on and Pat Robertson started to fade into the woodwork. Rick Warren represents all of that all over again. He's very much the same kind of man, and for Obama to be legitimizing that kind of far-right religion under the banner of the Democratic Party is unacceptable to a lot of the constituencies that make up the party.
I thought, from our right-hand perspective, I thought Warren was a squish on global warming. You're telling me he's a denier?
He's a denier.
Okay, news to me. I thought he was one of the new reformed evangelicals who were all about protecting God's creation. But
he's a squish from our perspective too. Good place to look for this is streetprophets.com, where my friend Pastor Dan has vented his spleen on this. Street Prophets is, of course, the religious blog that's affiliated with Daily Kos.
Right.
And Pastor Dan's a great guy. He's got, I'm not going to say I told you so, Rick Warren edition.
So what is Pastor Dan right there? The title of the post is, I'm not going to say I told you so?
Yeah. Shoot. Drat.
Well, as you're trying to get that up, I'll go ahead and read a post from Al the Pundit over at Hot Air.
It's not a whole long one.
Okay. Do you have one?
Here we go.
Go for it.
Even better. Faith and Public Life. faithandpubliclife.org. Here's also he's a squish on torture. He thinks that torture is kind of basically okay.
I did see that.
We're having a real problem with that.
Okay, we're back. Still talking about Rick Warren. And we're just finishing up talking about a post by Al the Pundit where he was asking, isn't the only difference between Warren and Obama on gay marriage that one supported Prop 8 while the other tepidly opposed it? And, what is your answer to that question, Sara?
Obama did make a statement of support for Prop 8. And the problem in the California end, I'm involved with a lot of people who are rethinking now the strategy for Prop 8. Mm-hmm. And the consensus in that community is that they did not capitalize on that endorsement nearly as much as they needed to. There were a lot of balls that were dropped, and that was a big one in their own assessment of what happened. But it's not just the gays who are being sold out by Rick Warren. Women are being sold out because Warren has a very retrograde idea about women's rights, not just on abortion, but on all kinds of things across the board. He's very involved with a lot of third world people, not specifically like Sarah Palin's Nigerian preacher, but people like that. He's got a lot of ties to third world preachers who are engaging in a lot of very questionable stuff. His record on global warming and the environment is cosmetic at best, and he believes in torture. So there are all kinds of progressive values, progressive constituencies that are kind of across the board. It's not just the gays who find Rick Warren pretty abhorrent, and he's trying very hard to make himself look like this mainstream guy. But if you look carefully at his policies, he's not. He's Jerry Falwell all over again, and that's the last thing that we should be putting forward at a Democratic event.
So I guess my question is, why raise such a stink over this? I mean, there's no actual policy here. There's no change in any regulation or law that Obama's opposing.
No, but inaugurations are full of symbolism, and they're public rituals, and they're just packed with symbolism. And so all these little details that you choose are making statements about who you are and what you want your administration to be about. And Obama's choice, this particular choice, is making some statements that make a lot of the people who elected him very uncomfortable. The good news is that he's not the only one up there. The fact that the inaugural committee is quick to point out that they've also asked Reverend Joseph Lowry, who's a civil rights icon and a supporter of same-sex marriage, to give the benediction at the end of the event. So Warren will speak at the beginning and Lowry will speak at the end. And this is supposed to balance things somehow. So, okay, fine. As long as we're talking about symbols, that's probably a better one.
Now, I've seen some suggestions on the leftosphere that the proper reaction to this is to turn your back on Warren when he gives the invocation.
It's interesting.
Is that the symbolism you would hope to see at Obama's inauguration?
As long as we're all dealing in the language of symbols, that seems to be as good a one as any.
Okay. Fair enough. Moving on from Warren into people that will have actual effects on actual policies. We have first on the list Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack.
Yes.
Who I guess earlier or late November he said he was not interested in the Secretary of Agriculture position, or that no one from Obama's camp had talked to him. But it seems that he's come around because Obama has officially announced that Vilsack is going to be his pick. I'll start off with a post from Ezra Klein. He writes, contrary to a statement that he gave to the Des Moines Register a few weeks ago, Vilsack will indeed be appointed Secretary of Agriculture. As I've argued before, the pick is not necessarily comforting. Vilsack is the governor of Iowa. Iowa is the nation's largest producer of corn, soybeans, and pork. As such, the state's second most important export is corn, followed by soybeans, followed by meat. Vilsack's agricultural experience has been as an advocate for those industries and a politician dependent on their favor. Appointing him to head the agency is like appointing the governor of a petro-state to head the Department of Energy. The pick may turn out for the best, but there's little evidence of that in the official record. So what's your reaction to the Vilsack nomination?
Well, I've been getting my news from La Vida Locavore, which is Jill Richardson's wonderful blog on the food movement and sustainable food movement. And her take on it is that, well, it wasn't the worst pick. With strong overtones that it wasn't anywhere near the best pick either. By the way, one of the things she points out is Iowa also leads the country in tractor production. So it's great.
Right. Yes, as anyone involved in the debate over free trade in Colombia knows, the Caterpillar plants in there export a lot to other states and also the country of Colombia.
Right. And of course, what a lot of progressives are hoping for, we see the whole issue of agriculture is not agriculture but food production. Well, of course, there's a lot more to agriculture than just producing food, but the part of it that produces food is the part that needs to be revisited. And it needs to be for all kinds of good reasons, having to do with global warming and having to do with environmental sustainability, having to do with food security. Monoculture is very insecure. And so we were hoping that the Obama administration would take this moment and take that leap and move us toward more organic food, more local food, more diverse kinds of food, better policies to preserve soil, preserve water. And Vilsack doesn't seem like our boy for that. So that's the objection there. Is we were hoping for something a little more ambitious and a little more visionary.
I was reading Ezra's points about it, and he was bad-mouthing the Department of Agriculture, and I was hoping just for a second that he was going to call for abolishing the Department of Agriculture, which, of course, us conservatives are always for getting rid of governmental departments. But it turns out he just wanted to change the name to Department of Food, which wouldn't really be much of a positive step for us conservatives. Just out of curiosity, what kind of wonderful programs and policies would a Department of Food put out to encourage this new progressive vision for food production and consumption?
It could use the mechanisms of, the farm bureaus and all the different agencies to the federal government. And I agree with you, by the way. There are massive problems with the Department of Agriculture. We may, in fact, be better off without it. But part of the issue is that the subsidies and policies are designed in a way that incentivize agriculture that is destroying the land, destroying the water. Gross algae blooms in the Gulf of Mexico due to nitrates washing down the Mississippi River. There are global warming problems. There are all kinds of issues that are coming out of the way we do food in the United States. And we have this infrastructure in place that we can use to incentivize people to do food differently. And in fact, you're right. And in fact, the free market, is most of the really interesting stuff is being done by the free market right now. Most of the organic farms are operating well outside the Department of Agriculture, and in fact are in conflict with it quite a bit. Also, a lot of the sustainable meat growers, both the chicken farms and the beef farms, that are wanting to do things a different way.
So maybe instead of a Department of Food, we just need to get rid of the Department of Agriculture.
That's perhaps one way to do it. Certainly, we need to do something different.
Now we've got people coming together across party lines on common grounds for change we can all believe in.
Right, and I don't think Vilsack's going to bring that change.
I agree with you. But again, like the Warren thing, we saw signs of this before. Obama has been a consistent supporter of corn ethanol. Right. Illinois is a big producer of it.
Exactly. He can't hardly be otherwise. It's probably unfair to expect.
Right. Well. Also, he's been big in blocking bringing sugar ethanol in from Brazil. So, yeah, protecting his home state's agricultural interests.
Which would be fine, by the way.
Is an established pattern of behavior.
And blocking Brazilian ethanol wouldn't be a bad thing if he would go ahead with cellulosic and switchgrass and all these other alternatives that American farmers could actually seize on, and would be much better than using corn, which is an important food and not a very good ethanol. So we need to find other better sources if we're going to make that commitment to biofuels, and whether or not we make that commitment is another conversation we need to have. Because way too much agreement here, Sarah. We're boring everyone to death. We're going to be boring. Sorry, everybody.
Before we move on to the Security Exchange Commission and Madoff, I just wanted to read a post by Chris Bowers talking about the role of dissent in the Democratic Party under Obama. Bowers' post is called Obama's Domination of Democratic Opinion. Bowers writes, right now, whatever Obama comes out in favor of will become the majority position within the Democratic Party. If over the next year Obama says that we need to tear down the health care system and start from scratch with single payer, then a majority of Democrats will quickly come to share that position. If over the next year Obama argues that it is time to invade Pakistan, then a majority of Democrats will come to favor that position. If he decides that Dick Cheney needs to be Secretary of the Interior or Noam Chomsky needs to be Secretary of Education, a majority of Democrats will come to agree with him. Right now, whenever Obama makes his support clear on anything, that position will either remain or become the majority position of Democrats nationwide. Those days of the net roots leading a majority of rank-and-file Democrats in opposition to the decisions of the Democratic leadership are over. Now that Obama is at the head of the Democratic Party, what he says will be the majority positions. I don't know how long this will last, but it could be several years. If Democratic electoral prospects continue to be bright, if Obama has a lot of success in passing legislation, if the state of the country starts to improve, Democratic dissent against Obama will continue to be a minority position in the party. Given that I hope all of those things will happen, I suppose that not even I am looking forward to a point where left-wing criticism of Obama administration is more widely tolerated. As Daniel DeGroot wrote a while back, people move toward winners after the election. Obama won. As long as this keeps happening, the party will move toward him, not anyone or anything else. As long as Democrats are winning, inter-party reform movements will probably have a difficult time. I thought that was pretty spot on. Do you have any agreements, disagreements with Bauer's analysis there?
Well, I know Chris, and he's brilliant. He's one of the most brilliant analysts I know, and I think he probably called it true. I'm probably less sanguine about, he's right. It's probably such a big and important onslaught that there is no fighting it at this point. My take on it is, and this is coming from Sarah the Futurist speaking. I think that the Obama administration is in the grip of a change wave that's much bigger than it is.
Okay.
And that there are a lot of plans and things that they've got in place right now that they're going to be overtaken by events, probably very, very quickly. We've got economic collapse that is going global at a furious rate. We've hit the elbow of the J curve, and away we go. We've got the GM going under, the auto industry falling apart. China's moving into crisis. Our dollar's going up against the euro. There are all these global economic crises. I don't have to recite the whole litany, but we all know we're in deep trouble. And in times of trouble, things change very quickly. And even though these are very bright people who are making very strong plans, and plans that they're all based on experiences that they've had in the past. And I think on some level we've hit a little singularity here, beyond which the future is not going to be like the past, and they're going to have to adjust rapidly. So, in as much as Obama can hold that consensus together, it's going to help him lead through that. But I think a lot of the stated plans and intentions are going to dissolve in the onslaught of the wave that's about to descend. So I'm not, and when that happens, alliances can change quickly, and opinions can change quickly, and so it's. I'm a futurist. I'm trained to know how to call what's likely to happen and what forces are most likely to dominate. And what I'm telling you is that we're in a position where all bets are off, and all the old relationships and all the old experience. Right now, it's all looking like it'll hold, but as events unfold over the next year, 2, 3, 6, that's going to start coming apart. And people who think they stand for one thing now may find themselves standing for exactly the opposite a year from now. So it's exciting.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm going to side a little bit closer to Bowers. I do think Obama's popularity is fundamental here, but it's
for as long as it lasts.
Right, and I do also agree with Chris that it will be greatly dependent on him to start producing, because he really actually hasn't done anything yet.
Right, but he does have very strong plans to start producing. He's not wasting a minute. Based on the.
But I would agree with you that on that same vein, that he has to start producing, that there is definitely a window for change here. I had a bet with Bob Wright about the election. I always thought Obama was going to coast to victory, and I was actually never really nervous about it. But after the election, I was actually going back and looking at that very small blip right after Sarah Palin was first introduced,
right?
Where not only did McCain's numbers and Palin's numbers come very close to Obama's, but actually the GOP brand itself almost pulled even with the Democratic brand entirely. And I was shocked to see
that moment didn't last more than a week or 10 days, as I recall.
No, that's true. Because going through it, I remember seeing the polls tighten, but I thought, that'll not last, and it didn't. But looking back after the election, I was surprised at how close they came to actually overtaking it. McCain then flipped out after Lehman Brothers collapsed, and it all crashed and burned from there. But in that sense, I was amazed at how fluid the opinion was over that month. It was actually a lot more closer than I remembered it being.
Yeah. Until the economy brought home very clearly to everybody what was at stake. And basically, I'm sorry, Conn, how very bankrupt the conservative position is in the face of this kind of problem.
Well, we're about to get there. I wouldn't say the nation saw that the conservative position was bankrupt. They just saw McCain acting like McCain, which is very erratic, and they did not like that erratic behavior.
Certainly in the face of that kind of crisis, you don't want that kind of erratic behavior. Or anyway, and we've seen 8 years of short-tempered and nasty, and I don't think we're ready for any more of that either.
Well, let's go ahead and shift gear to Madoff, since you want to make the pitch that is deregulation personified and is everything wrong with the world today. I'll let you run with that story a bit.
Okay. Actually, the best summary, I looked around and at the Madoff, and the best summary of it, actually, is Wikipedia under Bernard Madoff. Really nice summary, as Wikipedia often has. And what is astonishing to me is this is the man who was one of the 5 founders of NASDAQ. He used to be chairman of NASDAQ, and he's running a Ponzi scheme, a $50 billion Ponzi scheme. And this is astonishing to me. That and I mean, the details are just... I have no words. For instance, his auditor was a small accounting firm that had one active accountant. And this was this person who was auditing his stuff. It was a total failure of oversight. And
whose oversight though?
What?
Whose oversight though?
Whose oversight? Government oversight. The SEC.
Well, is it the government's job to do diligence for everyone who wants to invest $1? It
is absolutely the government's job to make sure that people are on the up and up about what they're offering investors. That's what the SEC was founded to do in the aftermath of the Great Depression, because nobody wants to invest money in a market that they don't know that they're getting straight information. All right, there's too much risk. Investors will hold back.
But what Madoff did is already illegal, right? Like, it's not like we have a failure of.
It is.
He still got away. It's not like we have a failure of laws here. It's not like we need new laws or new regulations, or that there was some existing regulation that was taken away and he exploited that. He just flat out broke the law.
But there was no oversight. It's one thing to have a law and another thing to enforce it.
Well, and one of the things that's happening. What do you mean by new oversight? I mean, the SEC budget under Bush has ballooned from $377 million to $900 million.
And what is this going for?
And enforcement has gone up. The number of staff devoted to enforcement has gone up 33% in that same time.
It obviously didn't get to Mr. Madoff.
Obviously. I guess I look at the larger case the left is trying to make with this of more regulation. And I guess I don't understand.
No, it's not more regulation; it's more enforcement, and it's probably getting.
Well, but I just showed you that the budget for enforcement has gone up almost threefold.
Yeah, and how do you justify that within the confines of your free market ideology, Conn?
Oh, first of all, you have to have someone to enforce the rules. There's enforcement of contracts, enforcing the rules is definitely possible.
Thank you.
But I think you always, a very strong conservative principle is that you always have to recognize the limits of regulation and the limits of law and the limits of what government can do. And it's not just Chris Cox who was sleeping here. Mr. Madoff had to register as a broker with New York's Investor Protection Bureau.
Who obviously was not on the job either.
Which means that Spitzer, for all the work he did, also fell asleep on the job, just like the SEC did.
I'm sure all those people were probably not. Their clarity of vision was not helped by the fact that this man did have the resume he had.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. And of course, now it turns out also that one of his nieces, I think, or daughters, was dating and then ended up marrying one of the SEC investigators.
Oh no! Really?
Oh yeah.
I didn't.
Really?
Wow. The Wikipedia entry talks about his sons, but not his daughters.
Oh well, it's a family relationship.
Yes,
it's either a daughter or a niece that was dating at the time and has since married an SEC investigator.
Yeah, actually, we do have. It says here he brought several relatives into his business. His brother Peter was a senior managing director. Both of his sons, Mark and Andrew, joined the team after finishing their education. Charles Weiner, a son of Mr. Madoff's sister, also joined the firm, and Peter Madoff's daughter Shana took a job at the company as a lawyer. So this was, and his wife Ruth also had a very strong participation in it. So this was a tidy little family business that happened to be a Ponzi scheme. And it's really interesting that as soon as he admitted that openly to his sons, they went to the SEC and turned it in. So he was
right. So I guess my question here is, I'm not seeing the progressive way forward on this. The resources for enforcement have already been raised threefold. We've already covered that this was illegal, so it's not like there's a problem of too little regulation. And it's not just that Christopher Cox is asleep at the wheel. We also had Elliot Spitzer asleep at the wheel. So, what is the, other than the conservative, insight that, there's only so much government can do. And because, as Megan McArdle's repeatedly pointing out, there are plenty of actual investment bankers, hedge fund managers who actually did do the due diligence and found out that this, was completely unreliable and therefore did not invest with them. So it's not like you couldn't figure it out. If you were a responsible person with your money, you could figure it out. It was only when you got conned into believing, because of his personal relationship, his resume, the fact that he found NASDAQ, it was only when you got conned into believing that you didn't have to do your due diligence that you got suckered into this.
Right. And unfortunately, the overall atmosphere of the last 30 years, especially since the 90s in Wall Street, has been such that, in general, there's been a lack of due diligence. And this is how you get into things like credit default swaps and collateralized debt obligation bubbles, and all these kinds of things where a lot of the money came so fast and so easy that people stopped asking questions. And so you're right. Government can't make a shift that forces people to be more diligent. And unfortunately, bad experience is the best educator, and a lot of people are getting their education now very expensive.
Wow, we agree again.
We do. But I think the government also has a role in making sure that, as you say, the rules are enforced and that things are on the up and up so that investors can have some confidence, because basically the market runs on trust. And if there isn't trust, nobody invests, and things come to a standstill, which is kind of where we are now. And I think government does have a role in reestablishing trust and getting things moving again.
Fair enough. Moving on to an area where the rules are definitely in flux, net neutrality. The Wall Street Journal set off a flurry of blogging this week when they came out with a story claiming that both Google and Stanford law professor Larry Lessig had changed their position on net neutrality, and that this signaled that Obama might too, and that the progressive vision of net neutrality was now in jeopardy. And the knockoff of the story was that Google had signed an agreement with was it AT&T? Anyways, it was some cable provider to make it easier for them to store their information within the pipelines of the cable company, so that their traffic would move quicker.
Right. And Lessig came forward on his own blog and made a statement about that, saying he would
take... As did Google.
What?
As did Google.
What?
Google has their own blog, and they also made a statement similar to Lessig's, saying the Wall Street Journal's all wet.
Right. They didn't quite get the nuance right.
Right.
Which is par for the journal. Sorry, couldn't resist the dig. Lessig made the point that it's okay for people to pay for different tiers. And he quoted himself, from years past, saying this has been a very consistent position. But anybody who wants to pay the price has to have access to that tier, which is to say that a carrier, AT&T or somebody, can't privilege Google over, say, Microsoft. Taking sides in that war. If Microsoft wants to pay the same price as Google, they have to be given the same access, and that's Lessig's position on this.
Great. My understanding is that your view, because that's not the free press view, and that's not the view of what largely identifies themselves as the net neutrality movement.
Right. No, it definitely isn't mine, and this is a subject near and dear to my heart, being an old Silicon Valley girl myself. I think the best solution for the internet is to remain a common carrier, the way that the phone company was for a long time a common carrier. This is legally safe. It is democratically the best thing because it allows for the biggest, broadest free market of ideas. It's safe for companies, for the carriers themselves, because when you start regulating content, which is to say, saying who has access to certain bandwidths and who doesn't, you become responsible for that content. What keeps AT&T from being legally liable when somebody plans a terrorist attack or makes a book using the phone lines is that they're common carrier. Everybody gets access to the phone.
So you're worried about the common carrier's liability?
I am. I absolutely am. No, I'm not. Your common carrier protects you from liability for any of that. The government can't sue you because somebody planned a terrorist attack on your phone lines, because you're not controlling content on your phone lines. You're simply providing a service for
if I FedEx child pornography, which I'm against,
you can't sue FedEx.
To my friend, that doesn't make FedEx any more liable than if I sent the child pornography through the United States Postal Service.
Because FedEx is a common carrier, right? Okay, so we agree here. The problem is when
go ahead.
So when the internet providers start privileging some carriers over others and start operating on anything but a first come first served basis, they are starting to control content. And when they start to control content, they're eroding their own protection against that liability.
But that's not what Lessig, and let me just say briefly that the conservative position is very close to Lessig's. The only difference between us and Lessig is that we believe the existing antitrust laws are enough to ensure open access, and that we're all for the pricing tiering. the classic, conservative question is, what's wrong with the model that we have for delivery of packages and mail, and that, I can send something on FedEx through, ground for, $10 cross country, or I can send it overnight for $25.
Right.
And that the cable company should be able to do the exact same thing.
Exactly.
With their right.
Damn it, Conn, we're boring again today.
but no, because I believe that the free pest Matt Stoller position is that the cable companies should not be able to do that the same way that FedEx and the United States Postal Service does.
That's all common carrier, and I think common carrier is absolutely the best model because it does allow everybody. It's pay to play, which is to say, if you want to pay for better access, at FedEx, if you want to pay for 3 day versus 1 day. But it's equal access. Anybody who wants to pay that rate can have access to that service. It's when FedEx starts saying that Sears is going to get preferential mailing services over someone else because they're Sears, and they start picking and choosing the winners and losers, that becomes a problem. It becomes a barrier to entry for new businesses. And it leads to monopolization and all kinds of nasty, evil things. And they're using their clout to skew the market instead of just providing a common carrier service. And with the internet, we see the same thing.
Okay, so I guess my question is, do you believe? I actually wrote a post on this whole net neutrality thing, and the post of mine was that the net neutrality Rorschach test, and that basically a lot of people who sign on to these free press petitions saying they're for net neutrality are basically, they all have their own idea what neutrality is, and boom, they're for it, so they say it down, but there's not a fundamental understanding of what everyone's position is.
Well, let me give you an example, actually, because we found out the hard way up here in Canada that we did not have net neutrality. When our local phone service, which is TELUS, had a strike. The workers went out on strike. This was the first summer we were here, I think 2004. And we had TELUS. We had all of our cable, broadband, phones, everything through TELUS. And TELUS decided, because it was the local kind of internet service provider, they blocked the website for the union. So nobody in the Vancouver area who had TELUS could access the union's website. Not only that, they didn't just block the website, they blocked the whole server, which meant several other hundred websites that were coming off that same server were also blocked. So TELUS did this unilateral thing. And of course, we as TELUS, we stopped being TELUS customers almost on the spot because we don't want our cable company telling us what we can and can't access on the web. But this is the kind of thing you get when net neutrality breaks down. When companies have that kind of power, they absolutely will use it, and we've seen it happen.
Well, I guess my next question would be, since I didn't follow this issue, you obviously stopped using them.
Absolutely.
Did other people, did they suffer in the marketplace because of their decision?
I don't know, and that's the frightening thing, is I don't know how many people. We occasionally still get marketing calls from them, and we say, oh, no, we remember that strike.
Well, right, because all of the American examples of, what we would call on the right would call scaremongering over net neutrality, whenever it has come up that Comcast is blocking BitTorrent, or that I think it was AT&T, one of their lower techs decided to stop some type of pro-abortion email. Whenever all those came out, the companies quickly disavowed it, stopped that behavior, etc. And that there clearly is a free market punishment for companies that would do something as blatantly bad as what you're talking about in suppressing a website.
The Americans, I think it's partly cultural. Americans have a very strong sense of when their freedom of speech is being violated, which is actually right there in itself the best argument there is for net neutrality. Because when we talk about a free market, a free economic markets absolutely depend on free markets in information. Because the free market theory says that good products will drive bad products out, and consumers will gravitate toward the better products. But how do they know that it's the better product? How do they know that some product is unsafe? They don't, unless they have access to a totally free market in information. And I have a lot of problem with conservatives who are less than committed to making sure that consumers have that full range of information that enables them to make healthy market choices, because the health of the market depends on that information. And yet, here we go with conservatives who little squishy on net neutrality, or who want food libel laws, every once in a while there are these issues that crop up that call into question conservative commitment to a free market in information. And the point I need to drive home is that the free market information is absolutely critical to the health of a free economic market.
Well, I think we agree on the principle. I just think we disagree on the the value add of government getting involved. I would say that your TELUS experience shows you were able to get out of that contract with the cable company and get your news elsewhere.
We only had one other choice.
Access to the internet through cable is wonderful and ubiquitous, but it's not the only way information gets to people. They have other ways of getting their information, informing themselves, and make decisions.
But it's a small market. There was only one other choice.
Go ahead.
If that other company went out of business, we would have been stuck. We would have had no choices. And that's where government comes in, because it would have protected. There are a lot of people in the United States who only have one service.
Well, see, now we're getting back to the Lessig position, or at least where the conservative position crosses the Lessig position, is that if there is such a situation where there is only one company that is able to control, access of internet broadband, we have a fix for that, and it's in it already, and it's called antitrust laws.
When was the last time anybody enforced an antitrust law in the United States? Again, having the law is one thing, enforcing it is another.
I know that XM Sirius merger took way too long to go through, so that I could not get my NFL games on XM this year. So they're obviously still screwing up my life in some way. But the one point I want to drive home on this before we move away is that I don't believe that the free press position is the Lawrence Lessig position and the one that you've been espousing. Matt Stoller has a post called Google Turns Evil.
Yes, I saw that.
And he writes, while the reporters got some stuff wrong, the basic disagreement is real. Lessig wants networks to be able to charge content providers to use Internet fast lane so long as the price is uniform for all content providers,
right,
which is, I think,
right.
The Lessig position is the one I have, and I think I'm hearing it's the one you have.
Pretty much, yeah. It's the same FedEx position that if you want to pay for an overnight rate, as opposed to a 3-day rate, you should have the right to do that.
But then Stoller says, this makes little sense to me. Off the top of my head, if that fast lane become really, really fast to carry, say, HDTV, and was priced really, really high, then sure, Google, iFilm, Comcast, or Random User Joe could all choose to pay that really high price. But in fact, this would be turning the internet into cable.
Right, and then, and Stoller makes a very good point, which is that having universal access to low-cost information is definitely a democratic good, and I think he's speaking to that good. And I think it makes a very, very valid point about that. So the question is our model a common carrier like FedEx or the phone company, or is it, are we talking about something far more fundamental, which is what the Internet has been. It's been very low cost, very high access. And I think anybody who wants to change that equation needs to really look at the democratic impacts of that.
Okay. But the bottom line is you have a different policy vision for net neutrality than Matt Stoller.
I'm agnostic on this.
Okay.
I am for net neutrality, and I see the problems that Matt is highlighting. I am a partisan sort of that low cost, high access democratic model. If I had my way, actually, this internet would be a utility. It would be not just a common carrier. It would be like water and heat and everything else, and it would just be everybody would get it. And there would be free public Wi-Fi, and there would be a pipe, and it would come to your house, and you would pay it like a utility bill.
So then you wouldn't have the option of FedExing something overnight under your utility model.
No.
Okay. Well then, now that we've got that cleared up, I think it's a great place to end here.
Okay.
Sarah, it's been a lot of fun, and we hope to have you back sometime.
Yeah.